Hello and welcome to Module 6 discussion board. I decided to talk about Jefferson's legacy in terms of his views on slavery and slaves at his plantation, particularly Monticello. So we know that Thomas Jefferson wrote that all men are created equal, yet he enslaved more than 600 slaves throughout his lifetime. He made money off of slavery, and he also wrote that he suspected that black people were inferior to white people. He believed that white Americans and freed blacks could not live together in a peaceful nation, and if the slaves had been freed, they could not stay here in the United States and live amongst their fellow white people. Jefferson was publicly against slavery on a public political forum. He threatened the survival of a new nation would be threatened by slavery, and he believed that all men on earth had specific rights, and one of those rights was the right to personal liberty. However, he did not feel that black and white people were able to uphold these liberties in the same location. He had slaves both in Paris and in Monticello, his plantation in Virginia, close to Liberty University. And at the time of the American Revolution, he was pushing hard for there to be political laws created against slavery. He felt that slavery was only going to continue to increase, and we could not create a new democratic nation on the basis of slavery occurring. So he started to discourage people from cultivating crops that would require slaves, such as tobacco and cotton, and instead turning to crops such as wheat, grain, and rice. We know that this did not work, and tobacco and cotton became major cash crops in the southern states, dependent on slavery. Slavery and slaves would soon double in the nation. Jefferson, he felt that freeing the slaves all at once could lead to a major revolt here in the new nation, but he felt that if we didn't free the slaves, that we could lead to a civil war. So it seems to me that he was almost torn between how this should be done. If we free them, they could revolt against us and possibly win, or create a very unstable nation that was just trying to start out. But if we don't free them, then the nation turns against each other. And we know ultimately his second view is what happened, and the Civil War eventually began in the United States. Jefferson himself, however, did own over 600 slaves throughout his lifetime. He enslaved slaves 6 days a week from dawn to dusk, and he would require them to do all the daily chores on his property. They did not have any free time except for Sundays or holidays, and in this time they were oftentimes trying to just work their own gardens or their own land so that they could have food and enough resources themselves. One of the most famous stories of Jefferson in slavery is that of Sally Hemings, who was a slave of Jefferson's in Paris, and he eventually brought her here to Monticello. It is said that he fathered 6 of her children, 4 of which survived to adulthood, and all worked for him at Monticello. He did eventually free 2 of them, and then he freed another 2 in his will. He also left Monticello to 2 of them in his will. This is the only family that has ever been documented to have been freed by Jefferson, and it is most likely his tie, and that means he fathered these individuals. The story of Jefferson and Sally Hemings came out about the time that Jefferson was in his first term as president of the United States. The idea of Jefferson and his slavery issues is quite fascinating to understand, that at a time where people were looking to individuals for national security, someone who was preaching against slavery and was for rights and equal liberties for all men, he himself was enslaving and fathering children with slaves on his Monticello. Thank you for watching, and Sorry for my assistant.